There's no doubt that AMD is now the dominant CPU player in the market, but Intel has their 11th generation coming out very soon. So how are they going to look versus AMD? Well, there are a few red flags so far that may spell trouble for Intel. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Remember to smash that like button. Some say for every like button that's smashed, your CPU is going to give you an additional 1 FPS in every single game you play. So today's topic at hand will be Intel's new 11th generation CPUs, Rocket Lake S, which should be coming within the next few months. Let's talk about a few major items here that may or may not spell trouble for Intel. First, a little bit of a summary. AMD, the last several years, has been absolutely dominating the CPU space. If it wasn't for the ongoing stock and availability issues plaguing Ryzen 5000, you can pretty much bet probably not that many people would be buying these Intel CPUs. AMD has been on a roll even last generation with the 3900X and the 3600. Those were CPUs that not only bolstered the lower end CPU market, but also the high end and enthusiast market, enough so that it even made X299, Intel's previous HEDT, the high end platform, made it be a little bit irrelevant, much more expensive CPUs for the dollar, not really making it a very attractive option versus AMD. So where do we stand now? Intel's reaction to Ryzen 5000 will be the new Rocket Lake S, the 11th generation CPUs. There are a couple of interesting things about this, but a couple of really big red flags that makes me wonder just how far Intel is going to be able to go once again in their battle versus AMD. So first, let's have a quick note on stock and availability. Like we mentioned before, Ryzen 5000, very hard to get. Either you're lucky at Micro Center or you catch a really fast, restocking of Newegg. But overall, you really can't go and buy these CPUs very easily. What this has done is a lot of buyers have actually gone towards the Intel side because not only is Ryzen 5000 sold out, even Ryzen 3000 has been less available recently, and the ones that are available, prices have skyrocketed. I've seen even 3900X, which should be a $400 CPU, selling for well over $500, almost close to the MSRP of the current Ryzen 5000 generation. So recently, a lot of gamers have actually found some pretty good value deals on Intel. For example, the 10850K, which is basically a 10900K, is being sold for $399 for a 10-core, 20-thread CPU that boosts all the way to 5.3 gigahertz. Certainly, it's a great gaming CPU, and while of course a lot of gamers might prefer AMD because of all the hype, and really it does typically perform better than Intel in certain games, the 10850K is no slouch, and we shouldn't just dismiss these Intel CPUs because people now favor AMD. It's always my opinion, you have to go for whatever hardware not only performs better, but also makes the most sense in the way that it's priced versus the competition. This could be Intel or AMD at any time. So having said that, that's why stock and availability of Intel 11th generation, regardless of the performance or price versus AMD, this may actually be a determining factor on the success of these Intel chips. For example, if Intel could actually have stock available pretty much right at launch of their 11th generation, they could pretty much gain a lot of market share back because AMD simply does not have stuff in stock right now in stores. So if Intel can pack those shelves, it's very possible they could definitely make some progress. Certainly, there is a good chance this may happen, as of course Intel's manufacturing all the way down to the 14 nanometer node to the way that they actually do it more in-house. It's a completely different ball game than AMD. So it's certainly very possible we can see stock numbers really be better than we've seen so far from AMD. That could definitely be a deciding factor for a lot of people. They're going to think at least it's in stock, they're able to pay MSRP for it, and it's going to be a lot easier to find than maybe one of these AMD CPUs. Now, of course, this is just a theory and speculation. If it ends up that Intel really can't produce any for the market either, and they're just as sold out, then that's going to put them, I think, in a much worse position versus AMD. So let's talk about performance. Of course, these aren't out yet, they haven't been benchmarked, but we do know a couple of facts. For example, the 11900K, which is going to be the top SKU, it's only going to be an 8-core, 16-thread processor. That's kind of a downgrade from last generation's 10-core processor. And of course, Intel has its reasons for doing this. And of course, we do expect a lot more IPC gain. Intel has said maybe up to 19%. That's definitely going to be a deciding factor in terms of some game performance. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see this CPU, at least in gaming, sort of temporarily take the crown back from the AMD 5900X, especially if the IPC gains and the boost clocks prove to perform as well as the numbers would indicate. But there's also a huge downside to this in that Intel has basically lost the marketing war so far. Even though cores, of course, aren't everything, having more cores for cheaper prices and good gaming performance is pretty much what AMD has been giving us, especially for Ryzen 5000. For example, a 5900X, it's also a 12-core, really very capable in any type of content creation. So here we have the perfect package at $549. It's not a $2,000 CPU, so that's why I think Ryzen 5000 may be very hard to beat. So when you're throwing out there, you know, an Intel 8-core 16-thread processor, immediately a lot of people are going to compare it to maybe a 5800X, which really shouldn't be the flagship. So Intel is definitely at a huge disadvantage here. This chip really better be absolutely exceptional in terms of its gaming performance, or else a lot of people are going to outright dismiss it right off the bat, because we're used to 8-core chips now performing really well. So for it to have any interest at all against something like a 5900X, it's really going to have to be something that's quite impressive with its single core performance. So then let's talk about some other advantages that the Intel 11th Gen will bring. Of course, these are going to bring PCIe Generation 4 now, so it's now on par with AMD. I know a lot of people had questions about Generation 3, Generation 4, when the new NVIDIA GPUs came out that do support it, as well as the AMD GPUs. Well, now you don't have to worry about it, because both Intel and AMD motherboards will now support that going forward. And of course, it's nice to note that you're also going to be able to use these new Intel CPUs on an existing Z490 motherboard. So if you don't want to buy one of these new motherboards, you can just use something that you have now. Most likely it's going to be more than capable of tackling these new CPUs, even the 11900K. So that's certainly going to be a nice little added bonus, because if you have to go out and buy a new motherboard, this may actually be extremely problematic, and I'm going to tell you why now. And from what we've seen from motherboard pricing for Z590, it is pretty insane pricing. So far, nothing's completely official, but from the prices that we've seen from Europe so far, it seems like everything, even more of the base boards, take something like an Asus Hero, will be considerably more expensive, like over $500 than past motherboards were. Now, of course, we were kind of expecting this because recently Asus was the first to confirm, because of the expiration of the exemption of tariffs, a lot of these components, including GPUs and motherboards, will see a pretty significant price increase, sometimes 20 to 25%. And certainly from these sort of early prices for Z590 motherboards, that's definitely what we've been seeing, as well as some motherboards that just seem to be outrageously expensive. For example, something like the MSI Godlike reportedly is going to be over $1,000, maybe as much as $1,200. And now previous generation Godlikes were already very expensive, a lot of them around $700, $750. And when you compare that to like a motherboard half the price, maybe like a MSI Ace, a lot of times the features that you get, it's really not worth it for that price difference. And I think now that the gap is even larger and these high-end motherboards are over $1,000, I really think that market is going to be extremely limited. And of course, that's not the most expensive motherboard we've seen. And there are also other very high-end motherboards that may be priced significantly more than $1,200. Sometimes I get it, if there's a special motherboard that really only a couple people will buy, maybe it has like an included water block or something like that. Those I can kind of understand why they're priced higher, and not that many people will buy those anyway. But it seems like even sort of the regular bread and butter type motherboards, stuff like the, you know, the Strix E and like the Hero motherboards, those all seem to have gotten a pretty significant price hike as well. And of course, those are going to be felt a lot more in the market than something like a one-off or a very rare motherboard that's, you know, $1,500 or $1,800. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. These new Intel motherboard prices, and I'm assuming whenever AMD launches new motherboards, they're going to be probably the same price as these as well. This really isn't a problem exclusive to Intel, but what it does do is that a lot of people who are getting into CPUs now and they're looking at AMD and Intel, unless the AMD motherboards go up in price to match what Intel is offering with the new Z590, that's going to turn a lot of buyers off from buying into the new platform. Maybe buyers will go for an older Z490 because when they're looking for what is pretty much a significant price increase for motherboards, just like we saw on GPUs. That's going to start to price a lot of people out of the market, and this certainly is something that Intel does not need at this point. They have a tough time already going up against AMD's competition, so to have sort of really expensive motherboards, it's going to be a very big bottleneck in terms of how many people actually go to the newer platform. So even with that sense, if the Intel CPUs are priced, at a decent fair price compared to AMD, they may have some trouble because of these motherboards. It's going to end up taking buyers away who are either going to have to buy an older generation Z490, or it may make their decision easier to just stick with AMD. So this is definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Prices this year have gone up, and I do see them going up even higher and definitely staying there. I don't see these prices going down at any particular time. And of course, on Intel's side, they need all the help they can get in order to be more competitive against AMD. So this is definitely going to be a potential issue that's going to bottleneck their progress. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe if you like content like this, and I'll see you guys on the next video.